Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I'm your host, Andrew Crusoe, and today we're going to talk about how I accidentally ended up in a French newspaper. So when we last left off, I had just walked across the gorgeous, dynamic city of Marseille in the south of France, right on the Mediterranean, the Côte d'Azur, the blue coast, the beautiful blue coast of the Mediterranean with the calanques, these white, incredible rock formations all around me. And whenever I visit a new place, I love to use Couchsurfing.com. Couchsurfing is an amazing resource for people who travel. I've talked about Couchsurfing in many other episodes. It's all based on references and reviews. I typically like to stay with someone who's hosted like 20 people and has all positive reviews. It's an amazing cultural exchange. You can I'll put that in the show notes for this episode. It used to be free, it used to be ad supported, and COVID messed up their business model apparently, and now it's about $15 for a year. So it's quite cheap for what you're getting. And one of the things I like to do is try to attend events. So usually a large city will have a Couchsurfing ambassador, somebody who's sort of an ideological ambassador for the idea of Couchsurfing. So they'll do something like they'll host like a picnic or a walk through a park or cycling or a photography thing, or often it's music related, which is great. And on that late July, I found out about a Couchsurfing meetup, which is basically a beach picnic, which is fantastic. I wanted to meet new people. And I met one of the ambassadors who was very nice, and I'll tell you something. This doesn't happen to me very much. He liked talking with me so much. He was basically like, "You should really stay at my place." And it was very funny because this is a guy who's hosted like 100 people and just loves meeting people from around the world. And I was telling him that I was going to take a carpool to get to Cadarache, to get to the fusion reactor project that I mentioned in the last episode. And he was like, "Well, you should totally stay." I'm like, "Right here, I'm close to the thing." And he sort of like, this is the only time where he accepted a Couchsurfing request from me before I actually asked to stay at his place. So he was nice. So I get to this beach and I meet the guy who wants to host me, and it's a pretty nice place. The gathering is pretty small. We had maybe like 5 people, and some of them hadn't used Couchsurfing. They just sort of found out about it. They hadn't like used it to travel. They were just using it to meet people in events, and that happens sometimes. That happened in London, where people would come to events and they wouldn't necessarily host or surf, but that's fine. They're just sort of meeting people, and any kind of cultural exchange, it can be a good thing because we realize how much we have in common. We realize our oneness. I mean, not to sound too much like a hippie, but I do think that that's part of how we heal the world. And they had laid out this blanket, and I forget what I brought. I brought some, I think I actually made some rice. Yeah, I have a photo here with veggies, and there's a baguette, which is vegan, which was nice. The ambassador had brought a big Couchsurfing flag, which is something that ambassadors get. And I met this sweet woman, younger-ish woman, who I'm trying to remember if she had like specific interview questions, but she sort of just talked to me about my experience in Couchsurfing. And she asked me if I would want to be if my photo with me in the group, like if I could be in this article she was working on for this newspaper, this local newspaper. And I was like, sure, great. And I should try to I have the photo of this article somewhere. I'm going to try to find it for show notes. Once again, show notes are always at patreon.com/Hello Crusoe. That's the word hello. And CRUSOE, like Robinson Crusoe. I really, really appreciate when you're able to, leave a little feedback. I'd love to hear if there's anything specific you're curious about. I want to hear if there's anything that you're excited to hear about, if you have any questions, and if you have any complaints. But maybe keep it to a compliment sandwich, say something nice, and then say something that you don't like, and then or not. I don't know. Be civil, of course. And that timing worked out really well. So when we had this event, I decided to stay at the ambassador's place, the Couchsurfing ambassador's place, because where I was Airbnb-ing, where I was staying, was a bit south of Marseille. It was a bus ride, and I got it because it's frankly just a way better deal than anything else I could find in Marseille for August. So I was a bit away from the city, which was fine because I was closer to the best hiking. I only had one real problem with that place, and that was how loud the traffic was at night. We were on a main road, and I had to come up with creative solutions to be able to sleep, which is a story I'll tell in a later episode. And I woke up, I found myself waking up toward the center of Marseille to catch my ride that I'd booked via BlaBlaCar. Now, you might not know BlaBlaCar, but BlaBlaCar is sort of like if Uber was less expensive and more fun. It's sort of a community of people that are just saying, I'm leaving from here and I'm going here. And I was catching a BlaBlaCar up to right. And it was tricky because I had to time this right. And I had already booked my tour at a specific time 6 months before. And the tours do book up 3 months before. They have a limit to how many people they can take it on ITER, obviously. And I really wanted to tour this experimental reactor. Now, it's in its kind of middle stages. It's not done yet. It's not producing a net positive amount of electricity yet, but it's a massive proof of concept, and they're creating so much new technology. And there are over 20 countries that are just basically delivering parts to the south of France to assemble this amazing device. And by the time you're hearing this, it will probably, it's made quite a bit of progress. It's possible that if you're listening to this, that it's even already generating power. So, I mean, yeah, net power, because you have to put a certain amount of power into it to contain the plasma, and then you get 10 times the power back. And it's completely clean energy. That's why it's so exciting. And there's no risk of a meltdown like in fission, what we would call nuclear in most countries. It's fusion. So instead of fission, instead of breaking molecules apart, they're smashing molecules together. There's no runaway like meltdown risk. It's the physics of it are totally different than nuclear. Totally different than what you know about nuclear. I feel like I should mention that now. So all this was building up to visiting ITER, and I really had a lovely moment of catching my BlaBlaCar ride. I think it was like two dudes. I think I met them at the train station. I get there. Let's see. So there's a couple parts to this story, and there was a bit of a misunderstanding, which I felt a little sad about. But I sort of get dropped off right beyond this toll booth, and I had to walk like the last, I don't know, even like mile, because my BlaBlaCar was going sort of a different turn. And this is something that nobody really knows. So I'm just sort of like walking along the edge of basically a county road or like a small highway. It was really tough, actually, to get a BlaBlaCar ride to that general area. There weren't that many people going in that week. And it was by far easier, but it was still easier to do BlaBlaCar than it was the bus, because the bus dropped off further down, and it was the logistics of it were a little bit complicated. And granted, part of that was because I didn't speak French and I'm translating these bus websites. That's something to keep in mind when you travel. It can be difficult. It can be difficult sometimes dealing with foreign public transportation, especially if they don't have all of it in Google Maps. Typically, if it's all in Google Maps, it's going to be translated and you'll know what to grab. You're going to catch the 203 at 3 o'clock or whatever. The thing is, it was far, right? It would have been 2 hours on a bus. I would have had to transfer in another city just north of Marseille. So the BlaBlaCar was by far the best option. But I still needed to walk a little bit. So I call the tour coordinator person and am I in the right place? And I'd actually had organized an interview with one of the scientists, but they couldn't make it. So one of the communications officers graciously agreed to be on the show. And I finally make it to the sort of orientation parking lot area, and I meet people, and we go inside of this like small theater room thing. I should say we also all get reflective clothes. I think we all got hard hats and flare protection, like like goggles, like and just like shades, not full on goggles. And because safety was quite a concern here, so we go through and we watch this presentation, which is pretty cool. And they explain how they're smashing all these elements together, and they're explaining how fusion works. And I've got some interesting photos of the diagrams. They talk about the vacuum vessel. So the vacuum vessel is basically this donut-shaped container where the fusion actually happens. It's 1,400 square meters. It's pretty big. And they said it's over 8,000 tons. It's this massive, massive thing. And the fusion happens in this container because there are extremely strong magnetic fields that contain the plasma. It's the only thing that you can use. There's like one other way, but it's the main way you can contain plasma because the plasma is crazy hot. So they showed these photos of the inside of the container. And they also showed a diagram of the whole work site, which was quite interesting. I'm going to include that for bonuses. If this is your first time listening to the show, good luck. Every Wednesday, I share photos to supporters of the show. And you basically get, for $10 a month, you get a huge backlog, really like massive, hundreds and hundreds of posts. You get all the photos that go with the show. You get tons of podcasts that have been members only on my Patreon. And you also get over something like 21 hours of nonfiction and fiction audiobooks. So that's something to look at. That's patreon.com/HelloCrusoe. I really appreciate everybody, even people who donate. There's also a $5 level, at which you get access to the audiobooks for that. But at $10, you get access to a lot more. And all those levels are outlined on patreon.com/HelloCrusoe. Crusoe as in Robinson Crusoe. I am a fictional character. One of the things that we did afterward, we got on this bus and they took us through the work site. This is a massive thing. It was the whole work site was the size of a small town. This is a large research facility, and they call it in-kind contributions. So all of the components are manufactured in their respective countries and then shipped to the south of France. And there's a whole team, I think, what's it called? It's called the standards team or the compatibility team. I might be getting that wrong, but there's a whole team of just making sure that to make sure that everyone followed the specifications and everything works together well, of course. So we got to this huge warehouse that was like several football fields, where they were assembling the magnetic rings that would make that. Remember how I said earlier, the only way to contain this plasma that's millions of degrees is to create a really, really strong magnetic field. Well, to do that, they make these magnetic rings, these huge electromagnets that are, one of them is 25 meters in diameter. And they're superconducting magnets. So it's hard to describe these, but they look like, it reminds me of the movie E.T. I don't know if you've seen E.T. Just like the seals, it looks like it's something that's going to space. It's not going to space, but often there are clean room environments. These huge rings that are keeping the magnetic rings stable as they're configuring them. These big yellow painted metal like frameworks that they're using, and those are they're really interesting to see. They're really wild. And I took some photos of that as well. And I do have a TikTok that I can link to, that had TikTok and an Instagram that has an excerpt of the interview. So after this really fun tour, and they were just incredibly helpful, a very pleasant, thoughtful experience, I would say, that I got lucky because I kind of asked ahead of time, hey, can I do this interview? And then I was sort of deposited in a waiting station. And then the weird thing happened, and I really don't know what happened here. I think there was a miscommunication or a scheduling conflict. I was given boots, and I was given like gloves, and I was waiting around, and I waited around in this waiting area, sort of by the parking lot, for over half an hour. And I emailed the communication director and I was like, hey, am I still going to get to meet you? I've been waiting for a while. And this was like, early afternoon. They might have just been finishing up their lunch break. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But all of a sudden I didn't need the boots anymore. So I still never found out what that was all about. But someone came and met me and drove me over to one of the other buildings, and I met with communication officer and had a lovely interview with her, which I can put in the show notes. I believe that interview should still be easily accessible. I spent the next week or so just sort of editing that and preparing to get that out. And the ITER Instagram page reshared it, and it was very cool of them to reshare that. And one of the things I put in that Instagram reel was a photo of I'm looking at it right now, a Lego. Someone had built the containment unit out of Lego, containment toroid, the donut that contains the plasma. And I'll go ahead and include that for people who support the show too. And we go and we get to sit in this office and have this nice view of Cadarache Hills in the distance. And I had this, very, very fun interview, kind of a wide-ranging interview of how this project has been decades in the making. And I was so thankful for the conversation I was able to have with Sabina Griffith. She was a great interview guest, and she was patient with my ADHD, which popped up a couple times. And she was overall quite a gracious guest, and I want to thank her again for coming on Ascendant. It's definitely one of the interviews I'm most proud of in my life. I'm really happy with what we're able to talk about, and she really put it in a historical context of how really trying to get away from the downfalls and what she even called the evils of fossil fuels, and how it is harming the environment. And not just climate change, but also pollution. There are a lot of issues with it. So they see this as the natural next step in really global energy production, because it scales much more. You can make so much more energy than you can with solar or wind. Solar and wind still have their place, and they are part of the answer as well. But looking down the line, most of the energy produced in 2050, 2060, it's looking like it'll probably be fusion. Which is entirely clean. So it's very, 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 very exciting. So they dropped me off back at the parking lot, and I was coordinating. I actually had to push back luckily my BlaBlaCar ride back to Marseille, because I still had to get back to Marseille. Luckily, that guy was running a little bit behind. He was a bit flexible. I put in a couple, an hour or so of padding in there anyway, because I didn't know exactly how long this would run. But it was a bit stressful for a second there, getting back. Anyway, I digress. It was a massive day. I was so thankful for both of my BlaBlaCar rides. We got there and back safely. I'm so thankful for Sabina Griffith for her time and her patience with the situation, because I know there was some scheduling. It felt like there were some scheduling things, and it worked out fine. And if you want to listen to that interview, I'll put it in the show notes. And if you want to share that interview, I can also put the Instagram and TikTok links. That's very appreciated. I'm very proud of it. I want more people to know about it, and they want more people to know about it too. This is not about me, okay? They gave me time to do an interview. A lot of places not so generous with their time, but they want media attention. They want more people talking about it, and I'm just really thankful to have the opportunity to do that interview. So that's the episode for today. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear what you think, constructive criticism, what you liked. If you have any questions, about travel in general, you can go to patreon.com/HelloCrusoe. Word hello, and then Crusoe, like Robinson Crusoe. I really love to hear from you. The comments I get are the encouragement that keeps me going in this journey, really. And there's also a link there where you can follow on Spotify, which you're really guaranteed not to miss any of the amazing adventures I have coming up if you get it on Spotify. I have some interesting adventures coming up to the Isles of the Friol Islands off the coast of Marseille. Another adventure is going to happen over there, and an adventure exploring the breathtaking golden cathedral on the hill of Marseille, and really just a lovely energy inside of those rooms, as well as more treats and more hidden spots and places that I really think you should check out, as well as advice on how to deal with the public transportation. All these things are coming up. And really, one of my absolute favorite places, one of the most photogenic places, really the reason why you should join at $10 a month, is something called La Friche, which is, oh God, this place is so photogenic. It is a huge urban space. I'm actually quite excited to talk about La Friche. It was a factory, and it took me a long time to find out exactly what it was, but it felt like a video game, and I'll talk about why next time. Thank you so much for listening, and aloha.